The world had changed in a single night, and Bond felt it in every breath he took. Across Europe, doors were being shut, identities were vanishing, and entire research teams were disappearing as if swallowed by the earth. MI6 intercepted fragments of coded transmissions, each pointing toward the same impossible truth. Someone was rewriting human identity. Someone who understood both ancient alchemy and bleeding-edge nanotechnology. Whispers called him the alchemist of the new age. But MI6 had finally obtained a name. Dr. Kieran Vale. A ghost. A scientist who should have been dead. A man capable of turning any human mind into a blank, obedient shell. And now Bond was standing at the edge of the labyrinth Vale had built. A maze of hidden labs, altered memories, and soldiers who didn't know they were soldiers. The deeper Bond went, the more unstable reality became. Nothing felt certain. No face could be trusted. No memory was safe. Because this time, the enemy wasn't just creating monsters. He was rewriting the world itself. Part 2 begins now. And the real hunt for Vale starts here. The storm had finally begun to relent, leaving the courtyard a chaotic landscape of broken columns, puddles reflecting jagged lightning, and the scattered remnants of Vale's nanobot swarm. Bond pressed himself against a fractured wall, serum secure, muscles burning, mind calculating every possibility. The courtyard was silent, save for the distant echoes of the storm. Yet, in the chaos, a single anomaly caught his eye, a small metallic pendant, half buried in a puddle of water, glinting unnaturally. Bond picked it up, eyes narrowing. The engraving was subtle, almost imperceptible, a serpentine emblem intertwined with an alchemical symbol. His pulse quickened. This was no ordinary mark. Every instinct screamed, this belonged to someone highly intelligent, someone meticulous, someone dangerous, someone he had just faced. The pendant was a trace, a breadcrumb left behind deliberately or accidentally. And in this storm-lashed ruin, it was the only tangible clue he had about his mysterious opponent. Bond studied the engraving carefully, fingers tracing the serpentine curves. He recognized it instantly from his training files, an emblem tied to a clandestine biochemistry faction rumored to merge ancient alchemy with cutting-edge technology. His mind raced. Could this be the signature of the man responsible for the serum? Could it be Vale himself? Before he could ponder further, a faint movement caught his attention. From the shadows of the shattered monastery walls, a figure stumbled, clearly abducted, terrified, clutching a torn document. Bond's instincts kicked in. He approached silently, rolling across puddles and debris, landing behind the figure with perfect balance. "Stay quiet," he whispered, voice low but firm. The figure froze, wide-eyed. Bond glanced at the torn document clutched in trembling hands. Carefully, he pried it free, scanning its contents. The paper was coded, but even a glance revealed fragments. Laboratory coordinates partially obscured, references to nanotech clusters, serum iterations, and security protocols. The handwriting was unmistakable, meticulous, almost obsessive. Bond's gut told him, this was Vale's work, and this abducted person had been forced to carry information without fully understanding it. The storm rumbled overhead as Bond guided the victim into a sheltered alcove. "Listen carefully," he said. "Who brought you here? Who runs this operation?" The figure's voice trembled. I don't know his name. They call him the Alchemist. I never saw him, but his lab, it's hidden, almost impossible to trace. Only a few ever know the way, and anyone who gets too close disappears." Bond's eyes narrowed. The Alchemist. The name confirmed his suspicion. His opponent was more than a rogue biochemist. He was a mastermind, merging ancient alchemy with modern science, operating from a nearly impenetrable hideout. He pressed further. Anything else? How do they move? How do they communicate? The abducted informant shivered. Encrypted messages, coded deliveries. People vanish and appear elsewhere. Only the shadows carry the secrets. But I think there's a pattern. If you follow the shipments and the timestamps, you might trace it, just maybe. Bond's mind raced. This was exactly the kind of challenge he thrived on. Dangerous, cryptic, but traceable if approached correctly. Every shipment, every timestamp, every shadowed figure could lead him to Vale's hidden lab. But it would not be simple. The paths were filled with traps, abducted personnel, and layers of deception. He thanked the informant, leaving them safely concealed in the ruins, and began piecing together the fragmented clues. A pendant emblem, traceable to biochemistry/alchemy faction. A torn document, coordinates, nanotech cluster references, security measures. Abducted informant's hints, shipments, encrypted messages, shadowed movements. Bond's next steps would require strategy, stealth, and brute skill. The lab was not merely hidden, it was protected by human pawns, mechanical drones, and possibly lethal chemical or alchemical traps. To get there, he would have to blend intelligence gathering, stealth maneuvers, martial arts, and improvisation, exploiting every weakness in Vale's system. The storm cleared slightly, leaving a heavy mist over the courtyard. Bond crouched on a wet stone ledge, eyes scanning the horizon. Somewhere in this fog, in the labyrinth of shadows and hidden corridors, lay the secret lab of Dr. Kieran Vale, the alchemist. And Bond knew that to uncover it, he would need all of his wits, skill, and courage, for every clue carried danger, and every move could be his last. He exhaled slowly, heart steady, gaze fixed. The hunt had begun. The mist hung thick over the outskirts of the ruined monastery, swirling around broken pillars and half-collapsed walls. Bond moved silently, each step calculated, boots making only a soft splash against puddles. The pendant in his pocket glinted faintly under the dim light, a small but vital clue tying him closer to Vale's true identity, the elusive alchemist. The informant's hints replayed in his mind, shipments, coded messages, vanishing personnel. Bond's eyes scanned the horizon, noting faint tracks, subtle disturbances in mud and wet stone. Every micro-clue mattered. The courier trails, the subtle timing of vehicle movements, the faint marks of boots. They were pieces of a puzzle that only a trained observer could decipher. Hours passed in careful observation. Bond ducked behind a crumbling archway as two shadowy figures approached, carrying crates marked with the same alchemy emblem as the pendant. Each figure moved with mechanical precision, their gait suggesting military-style training or enhanced coordination. Bond's pulse quickened, but he remained calm, calculating their route, the timing, the drop-off points. The first figure paused at a narrow alley, checking a handheld device emitting faint digital pulses. Bond rolled silently behind debris, maintaining a perfect line of observation, noting every movement. He memorized the route, patterns, and timing, storing it in his mind for later pursuit. Suddenly, one of the figures sensed something. Its head turned sharply toward Bond's hiding spot. Without hesitation, Bond tucked low, rolled behind a broken pillar, and launched a precise elbow strike at a loose stone, sending a sharp clatter echoing into the mist. The figure stiffened, glanced around, and continued cautiously, but the subtle warning had given Bond just enough insight. The perimeter was actively monitored. Using the shadows and mist as cover, Bond followed the trail of crates and personnel. Each abandoned path, each coded delivery, brought him closer to Vale's hidden laboratory. But the pursuit was perilous. Every step carried the risk of discovery, traps, and confrontation with enhanced guards. At one point, Bond noticed a delivery cart partially concealed in a collapsed archway, a series of faint footprints leading from it into a dense forest line. He crouched, listening to the rhythmic pounding of his own heart, then moved silently forward, blending into the underbrush, eyes scanning for any electronic or mechanical surveillance. Suddenly, a low hum. Nanobot swarms? Bond froze, calculating. The hum was faint but distinct, emanating from above. Using a precise jump, he vaulted onto a fallen log, then executed a controlled roll to land silently on the other side of the clearing, narrowly avoiding detection. His martial training, agility, and keen observation kept him alive. Hours turned into a tense night of tracking and subtle confrontation. Bond intercepted a courier, one of Vale's abducted personnel forced to transport information. Using martial arts and psychological intimidation, he quietly subdued the courier, ensuring no alarms were triggered. Carefully, Bond extracted the cryptic data they carried, a series of coordinates, timestamps, and encoded instructions pointing deeper into Vale's network. Bond studied the notes under the cover of dense foliage. Each set of coordinates was a node leading closer to the secret lab, but the paths were intentionally misleading, full of false drops, decoys, and security checkpoints. His mind raced, analyzing patterns, cross-referencing timestamps, anticipating Vale's manipulations. By dawn, Bond had mapped the probable paths to the hidden lab, identifying safe observation points, infiltration routes, and likely traps. The pursuit was far from over, but for the first time, he felt a tangible link between the pendant, the abducted personnel, and Vale's operations. The Alchemist's labyrinthine scheme was beginning to reveal itself. He paused on a ridge overlooking a dense forest, mist curling around jagged rocks. Vale's lab was still invisible, hidden in plain sight, protected by shadows, technology, and fear. But Bond's resolve hardened. Every clue, every observation, every calculated risk brought him closer to the heart of the Alchemist's secret, and he knew that the next step would require both cunning and brute skill. The hunt had only just begun, and in the silent morning mist, Bond prepared to move deeper into Vale's world of secrets, traps, and deadly innovation, where every shadow could conceal danger, and every step demanded perfection. Mist still clung to the edges of the ruined forest, curling around ancient trees like ghostly fingers. Bond crouched atop a jagged ridge, eyes scanning the faint movement below. From the shadows, he could see subtle signs of activity. Faint flickers of light in hidden windows, soft mechanical hums, and the glint of armored guards patrolling paths lined with fallen branches and shattered masonry. The pendant in his pocket was warm against his chest, a reminder that every small clue brought him closer to Dr. Kieran Vale, the alchemist. Bond's mind replayed the informant's cryptic words: shipments, coded messages, vanishing personnel. He had pieced together probable routes, but now the challenge was immense. The lab was hidden, designed to erase itself from sight for anyone unprepared. Bond moved silently down the slope, using a fallen tree as cover. Each step was measured, calculated, avoiding loose debris and puddles that could betray him. A pair of guards passed mere meters away, their reflections flickering in shallow puddles. Bond froze, pressing against a wet rock wall, then executed a silent takedown, a precise elbow to the guard's neck, a controlled wrist lock, and a swift sweep of the legs. The man collapsed silently. Bond dragged him into shadow, checking the comm device clipped to his belt. Encrypted chatter confirmed his suspicion. The alchemist's lab was active, security tight, with nanotech surveillance and traps outside any visible perimeter. Bond's pulse quickened. This was no ordinary facility. It was a fortress designed for one purpose: to protect Vale's serum and experiments at all costs. Bond paused to study the terrain. There were multiple access points, each seemingly innocuous, but tiny disturbances in foliage and subtle where patterns in stone suggested movement patterns, patrols, and supply routes. He crouched behind a low stone wall and pulled a small prism device from his coat. With careful adjustments, it reflected light into hidden corners, revealing camouflaged entryways, tripwires, and nanosensor clusters. A soft cry from the shadows caught his attention. Bond approached cautiously, finding a second abducted courier tied to a tree, gagged, terrified. Using a quiet combination of wrist locks and gentle intimidation, Bond freed the individual. The courier gasped, pointing toward a faint trail. Shipments. Every night, from the northern ridge, through the fog, near the old watchtower. Bond memorized every detail. Every abducted person, every minor clue, each pattern became a fragment of the map leading to the lab. He tested multiple observation points, moving silently across wet stone, balancing on broken beams, ducking under low-hanging branches. Every step could trigger detection, yet his martial agility and sharp reflexes kept him invisible to patrolling guards. Hours passed. Bond discovered a pattern in the supply drops. Crates moved under the cover of fog, using hidden pulley systems and underground access points. He also confirmed Vale's identity indirectly. One guard carried a document stamped with the serpent alchemy emblem, matching the pendant Bond had recovered earlier. It was subtle confirmation. The man behind all this was intelligent, meticulous, and ruthlessly secretive. Bond crouched on a ridge as dawn approached. From this vantage, he could see a faint outline of a structure partially camouflaged by the forest. The first real hint of the Alchemist's laboratory. Surveillance drones hummed faintly above, nanobot swarms shimmering in the morning mist. Bond did not move closer. He studied the layout, patrol routines, and environmental traps, preparing for the next phase of infiltration without alerting Vale. The danger was palpable, the suspense razor-sharp. The lab existed, the Alchemist was confirmed, and every micro-step Bond had taken brought him closer to uncovering the serum's secrets. Yet the facility remained untouchable for now, shrouded in shadows and hidden behind layers of cunning design. Bond exhaled slowly, muscles tense, mind alert. Every observation, every silent move, every clue collected had built the map, but the real challenge was still ahead. The shadows of the Alchemist had enveloped the lab completely, and Bond knew the next steps required maximum caution, patience, and precision. The forest was thick with mist, each droplet of rain from the night before glistening like tiny lanterns in the weak morning light. Bond moved silently, crouched low, each footstep calculated, boots pressing into moss and wet stone. Every shadow could hide a patrolling guard, a nanobot sentinel, or worse, a booby trap designed to erase intruders. Ahead, faint movement drew his attention, a guarded path along a fallen stone wall, barely visible through the fog. Bond paused, crouched behind a gnarled tree root, observing. One guard carried a small bundle, likely documents or microchips detailing lab operations. Bond's mind raced. Every piece of information was vital to tracing the Alchemist's network. He advanced with stealth perfected by years of training. Silent rolls, precise pivots, controlled breathing, every motion calculated to avoid sound. As the guard paused to inspect the path, Bond struck, a light, precise strike to the neck and shoulder, just enough to incapacitate silently. He dragged the man into shadow and checked the bundle. Inside were encrypted maps, coded shipment records, and partial lab schematics. Bond studied them carefully. Each coordinate, each timestamp, each symbol was a breadcrumb leading closer to the Alchemist's hidden domain. One map indicated a network of underground access points, cleverly concealed under natural terrain and forest debris. The mist shifted as Bond continued, tracing paths suggested by the courier's notes. He came across a small clearing, where another abducted person was hidden, trembling and blindfolded. Bond approached silently, using a combination of wrist locks and swift martial maneuvers to neutralize a lone guard stationed nearby. The victim, though terrified, whispered vital hints. Shipments, always at night, hidden pathways, underground, only shadows know the way. If anyone follows the wrong step, they vanish. Bond memorized every detail, integrating it with the partial schematics he had recovered. Each abducted individual, each courier, each movement pattern became part of a mental map, slowly revealing the labyrinthine structure of Vale's hidden network. He paused at the edge of a shallow stream, mist curling over the water. Using reflections and shadows, he observed tiny disturbances in the forest floor, almost invisible trails left by personnel and nanobot scouts. He traced them quietly, vaulting over fallen logs and ducking under low branches, every movement precise, every step calculated to avoid detection. A sudden faint hum above alerted him. Drones? He flattened against the mossy ground, timing his breathing to the rhythmic sound, watching as the mechanical swarms patrolled briefly before moving on. Bond used the delay to advance further, gathering microclues, footprints, displaced foliage, and subtle electrical readings from hidden sensors. By evening, Bond had pieced together enough to identify the outer perimeter of Vale's laboratory network. He knew the exact locations of patrol patterns, hidden traps, and delivery routes. Yet the lab itself remained elusive, shrouded behind layers of deception, advanced technology, and Vale's meticulous planning. From a vantage point atop a ridge, Bond surveyed the fog-laden forest below. The Alchemist's domain was real, active, and lethal. Every clue, every abducted person rescued, every silent observation brought him closer. Yet the ultimate confrontation and the secrets of the serum remained tantalizingly out of reach. Bond exhaled, muscles tensed but controlled, eyes scanning the horizon. The hunt for Vale's hidden laboratory was far from over, and the shadows of the Alchemist stretched long, hiding danger and secrets in every corner. For now, Bond had what he needed: the map of patterns, proof of the lab's existence, and confirmation of Vale's identity as the mastermind behind the serum. But to penetrate the Alchemist's domain, he would need unmatched precision, patience, and skill, and every move from here on out would bring him closer to peril. The fog thickened as Bond crept through the forest, each branch and stone a potential betrayer. Rain from the previous night still clung to leaves, dripping rhythmically onto the moss-covered ground. Every sound, falling water, shifting foliage, distant birds, was amplified in the stillness, masking his approach yet reminding him how fragile invisibility was. He paused near a narrow ravine, observing a patrol of enhanced guards moving silently along a hidden path. Each man carried a faintly glimmering device strapped to his arm, likely a sensor or alarm linked to the lab. Bond studied their pattern, timing, distance, and subtle hand gestures. One misstep, one miscalculated roll, and he would trigger an alert. Crouching low, Bond executed a series of controlled rolls and silent vaults, using fallen logs and rocks as cover. He approached a shallow stream acting as a natural barrier, listening as water lapped against hidden rocks. From here, he could see subtle disturbances in the undergrowth, footprints, displaced leaves, and shallow depressions hinting at secret routes leading deeper toward Vale's laboratory. Suddenly, he froze. A thin wire glinted in the fog, stretched across the path, almost invisible. Bond's heart rate quickened, and his mind ran rapid calculations. It was a tripwire, likely connected to alarms or nanotech defenses. With precise movements, he shifted to the side, rolling beneath a low overhang, then executed a quiet elbow strike to a nearby loose branch to adjust shadows and mask his motion. Moments later, a faint hum above indicated a drone sweep. Bond flattened against the ground, timing each breath with its mechanical pulses. When it passed, he moved forward, using every shadow and natural contour to mask his progress. Every step brought him closer, yet each step was a calculated risk, each movement a test of agility and precision. Along the way, Bond found another abducted courier, bound and left in the underbrush, likely a victim of Vale's ruthless efficiency. Using a combination of stealth takedown and precise wrist locks, he freed the person. Whispered instructions revealed further details: hidden access shafts, reinforced perimeter points, and night-only supply routes. Bond memorized every detail, integrating it with the data he had collected earlier. From a high vantage point, Bond glimpsed a section of the lab itself, partially camouflaged under foliage and fog. Advanced surveillance towers surrounded it, small drones patrolled the outer perimeter, and sensors glimmered faintly in the mist. The laboratory was a fortress, invisible yet omnipresent, every element designed to delay, detect, or destroy intruders. Bond crouched, analyzing the terrain. The perimeter alone suggested multiple layers of defense: hidden tripwires, nanotech sensors, automated patrols, and likely chemical deterrents. Each clue he had gathered, from pendants to abducted personnel hints, now formed a comprehensive mental map, showing the exact points of vulnerability and observation. The sun began to rise, casting muted light through the fog. Bond remained motionless, muscles coiled like springs, mind sharp and alert. He had approached closer than ever to the Alchemist's domain, gathered critical intelligence, and confirmed the lab's existence. But the true challenge, the entry and confrontation with Vale, remained ahead. For now, patience and observation were the only weapons. Every movement, every glance, every shadow could conceal danger. Bond exhaled slowly, eyes scanning the perimeter. The Alchemist's fortress loomed, untouched, untouchable, for now. And in the quiet of the misted forest, Bond understood the truth. To breach this lair, he would need every skill he possessed, and the courage to step into the ultimate shadow. The forest thickened into a near-impenetrable tangle of mist, twisted roots, and jagged stones. Bond moved like a shadow, every step measured, silent, precise. The pendant in his pocket pressed against his chest, a constant reminder that every clue he'd gathered, every abducted courier, every shipment, every coded message, was now leading him to the Alchemist's hidden domain. Ahead, faint flickers of movement revealed patrols and mechanical drones scanning the perimeter. The forest floor was littered with subtle tripwires, barely visible sensors, and natural camouflage traps designed to unnerve any intruder. Bond's eyes scanned each obstacle, calculating the path of least detection, mentally marking each guard rotation and drone sweep. Suddenly, a soft cry echoed through the fog. Bond froze. Another abducted victim, tied to a tree near a hidden supply drop, trembled in the shadows. Using a combination of fluid martial arts moves, elbow strikes, wrist locks, and silent takedowns, he neutralized the single guard watching the prisoner. The victim whispered vital information. They moved the serum through underground shafts. The lab, the core is heavily guarded, traps everywhere, only shadows see the way. Bond memorized every word. Each fragment was a piece of the mental map he had been constructing: patrol routes, sensor clusters, access shafts, and weak points. He pressed forward. At the edge of a small ravine, Bond glimpsed part of the camouflaged lab for the first time, a massive structure hidden beneath thick foliage, sensors gleaming faintly, drones patrolling in patterns that would make any misstep fatal. The sight sent a surge of adrenaline through his veins. The lab was real, active, and lethal. Every microstep brought Bond closer to uncovering Vale's secrets. He studied environmental hazards, a tangle of nanobot-infused vines, mechanical tripwires, and faint chemical trails designed to incapacitate intruders. Timing and precision were crucial. Bond rolled beneath a low branch, vaulted over a fallen stone, and crouched behind a moss-covered boulder as a drone swept overhead. The faint hum was deafening in his ears, yet he remained invisible, calculating the perfect timing for every move. The sun dipped low, shadows stretching long over the foggy forest. Bond's eyes swept the perimeter. Each patrol, each sensor, each faint glimmer of light was a clue to the Alchemist's defensive strategy. And somewhere within those shadows, Vale was waiting, ready to strike at any who dared approach. Bond exhaled slowly, muscles tense, mind alert. He had come closer than ever before, collected critical intelligence, confirmed Vale's identity, and traced the outer patterns of the lab. But the heart of the Alchemist's lair remained untouched, hidden beneath layers of security, deception, and danger. And in the misted silence, Bond understood the truth. To penetrate this domain, he would need all of his skill, every ounce of cunning, and complete mastery of stealth and combat. One wrong step could cost him everything. The forest seemed to hold its breath as Bond crouched on a ridge, eyes fixed on the partially camouflaged structure. The final confrontation was still ahead, but the pieces were falling into place. Every shadow, every faint sound, every whispered clue brought him closer to Vale's secret laboratory, and the serum that could change the world. The thick forest fog had finally thinned, and Bond had reached the side of the mountain where the deep, heavy roar of the river echoed like a warning. Below, between sheer cliffs, a metallic shadow glimmered, but the kind that almost no ordinary human could ever notice. Only someone trained like Bond could. The lab was constructed inside a triple-layer canyon. From above, all one could see was forest and scattered mountain rock, but upon closer inspection Bond noticed. 1. The natural cliffs had been artificially reshaped so the facility would remain completely invisible. 2. Below, along the river, a hydroelectric waterfall turbine system was secretly providing power to the entire lab. 3. The main structure was a submerged dome, half underwater, half buried inside the canyon wall. A smooth, gunmetal dome, silent, seamless, scientific perfection. Bond scanned the area through his binoculars, and one by one, he detected the security layers. A jet-black quad drones. A silent rotor technology. A facial and heat signature detection. A micro-EMP stingers capable of paralyzing an intruder in 10 seconds. A random zigzag patrol routes, no predictable pattern. Bond wrote a note in his small notebook. 7.4 seconds blind zone. No wires, no plates, nothing visible. But Bond observed. Some fallen leaves were arranged unnaturally. Some stones were too smooth. Some roots were spaced with perfect uniformity. These were all clues indicating automatic pressure mines. These were the most dangerous. Hidden inside small bushes. Fired only on thermal motion. Laser-guided precision. Double-barrel pulse rifles. Range, 200 meters. Bond noticed their cooling cycle every 14 minutes. A tiny weakness. Inside the cliff, an invisible barrier activated. When Bond threw a small pebble, the pebble froze in mid-air and disintegrated into dust. A faint shimmer appeared for 0.4 seconds. It was an AI prediction security field, something that calculated the direction of movement and microsliced any matter entering it. Bond immediately noted. Shadow wall. Avoid at all cost. 10 elite guards. Foreign legion. Exosuits for silent movement. Retractable shock batons. Neck-mounted comm units. No flashlights, only thermal goggles. These were men who ensured a kill before they died. Bond's expression changed. This wasn't a normal lab. It was a war fortress, designed by someone brilliant, dangerous, and absolutely ruthless. Bond couldn't observe all of this directly. Some information came indirectly. Here is the complete spy-level breakdown. The guard Bond had knocked out in Chapter 3 had an encrypted wristband chip. Bond cracked it with his Q-chip scanner. The smartband logs revealed. Daily patrol routes. A outer perimeter access codes. A guard rotations. A turret battery cycles. A drone maintenance windows. Bond smirked. Found your first crack, Vale. Bond scanned the air with a portable sniffing device. He detected a liquid nitrogen traces, a hydrofusion coolant, a bioserum evaporation molecules, all signs of an active biochemical lab. Bond created a computational model based on the river's flow pattern. This confirmed a water source artificially diverted, or an underwater tunnel exists, or a vertical shaft exits beneath the lab, maybe a secret escape route. Now Bond had a clear mental map. After nightfall, Bond scanned from a high branch using thermal imaging. White-hot signatures revealed. 3 main laboratory chambers. A 1 underground vault. A 1 reactor room. A security barracks. A 1 unknown chamber with no heat, possibly Vale's personal room. Lab layout. Security weaknesses. Guard cycles. Blind spots. Bond had everything he needed. A Mark turret cooldown cycles. A record drone blind zone timestamps. A bypass routes for pressure mines. A shadow wall disable code estimations. A underground shaft entry window, lowest water pressure at 3:14 a.m. A closest guard patrol gap, 15 seconds. Bond zipped up his jacket. Nobody builds a fortress this tight, unless he's hiding something world-ending. Vale. The Alchemist. A dangerous spark lit Bond's eyes. Time to break your castle, Vale. The night was taking deep breaths of its own. The jungle air was cold, moist, and heavy with the raw, earthy scent of giant leaves. Below, in the canyon, the roaring river played like a constant bass note. Bond tightened his black tactical jacket. The micro-textured surface of his gloves activated, optimized for gripping tree bark. Tonight, he was going to break a fortress. And this was no ordinary fortress. This was the Alchemist's fortress. Bond activated the stealth timer on his left wrist. 2:59 a.m. The third turret cooldown cycle was about to begin. Game begins, he whispered. Far in the darkness, he heard a faint tick-tick-tick. Bond didn't raise his binoculars. The sound was enough. The drones were switching formations. Now they moved in a zigzag, an inverted Y pattern. Bond synchronized his breathing. As the first drone passed directly above him, Bond dropped completely flat. No movement. No breath ripple. A thermal grid sweep passed over him. Bond activated the cold patch mode on his wristband. For 3 seconds, his body heat dropped so low it resembled a dim light bulb. The drone scanned, stopped, reanalyzed, moved on. Bond whispered, "Thank you, Q." He rolled down smoothly, disappearing into the grass without a sound. He passed the second drone completely unseen. The blind spot of the fourth drone lasted only 7.4 seconds. Bond calculated 7 steps. 1. Soft heel. 2. Route bypass. 3. Micro dip. 4. Left slide. 5. Push forward. 6. Breath hold. 7. Drop. And he slipped into the darkness as if he had never been there. Bond picked up a fallen leaf. He inspected its veins. Perfectly natural. He dropped it to the ground. It bounced slightly. Excellent. Bond took out a micro laser pointer and swept it across the ground. A thin red shimmer appeared. Mines. Everywhere. Bond thought. Classic overkill, Vale. He read the density pattern. A left path, 14 mines. A right path, 22 mines. A middle path, 9 mines. But the middle path had a problem. A smooth rock, a buffer plate. Bond made his decision, middle. He tightened his boot laces. Pressure-sensitive toe control activated. His first step went 2 centimeters to the right. Second 4 centimeters forward. Third right on the edge of an invisible plate. If Bond's weight shifted even 600 grams, boom. But his training gave him robotic precision. He moved from stone to stone, following the leaf patterns, sliding like a snake. The last jump was 1.7 meters. If the timing was wrong. But Bond landed silently. The mines were now behind him. The turret's cooldown cycle ran every 14 minutes. The cycle began. A faint metallic PFF-HHHHH. Cooling gas released. Bond started the stopwatch. 14 minutes. He pressed himself flat against the steep rock wall. A red laser streak passed right beside him. Bond deployed his thermal sponge cloak. The cloak absorbed his heat, turning him into a cold, lifeless object. The laser scanned. Nothing. He simply didn't exist. Bond crawled into the blind cone of a turret. Its barrel was 1 inch from his face. He gently rotated it with his glove, locking it in the opposite direction. "Sweet dreams," he whispered. Bond crouched low. This invisible field was the deadliest. He blew a dust particle into the air. It traveled 2 cm. And shhhhhtt, vaporized, as if reality itself had eaten it. Bond opened the captured guard's smartband. Inside, he found an automated routine. Shadow wall, safe passage protocol, 0.7 seconds. Bond thought. So Vale himself needs a bypass window. The 0.7 second window put the AI into a micro-sleep cycle. But there was another catch. The passage was exactly through the center lane. If Bond was even 1 centimeter off, gone. He took a deep breath. Activated the bypass. 0.7 seconds began. Bond launched into an explosive sprint. Step 1. Full force push. Step 2. Center alignment. Step 3. Perfect foot landing. Step 4. Body lean adjustment. Step 5. Straight line burst. Step 6. 0.3 seconds left. Step 7. 0.1 seconds. Step 8. Boundary cross. The field snapped back. Bond survived by a hair's width. "Don't build toys you can't control, Vale," he muttered. Bond was now inside the fortress perimeter. Here patrolled the elite guards who were spoken of only in whispers. Exosuits. Silent boots. Thermal goggles. Retractable shock blades. These men could breathe without making a sound. Bond slid into the shadows. He noted the patrol timing. 17-second loop. One guard coming from the right. Another from the opposite direction. A third checking a turret. Bond triggered a micro-vibration pulse from his wrist. A tiny ant-sized device hidden under a leaf activated. The guard's comm distorted. "What? Static, repeat." The guard turned toward his partner. Bond slipped through the gap into a narrow steel passage. He found a 1 centimeter crack. Through it, he could glimpse the intersection of the lab. Bond tracked the water shaft timing. 3:14 a.m., lowest water pressure. That was the moment. He took out a small metal hook, locked it onto the pipe's ridge. A controlled slide. Bond dropped into the underwater tunnel. The water was dark, cold, narrow. He had only 7 seconds to swim through. He bit a B-type oxygen capsule. Instant oxygen. He dived. A faint white glow appeared at the end of the tunnel. Bond rose up and found himself in the lowest chamber of the lab. Silver walls, blue neon lines, glass tubes, bioreactors humming quietly, AI drones hovering like metallic bees. Bond stepped silently onto the floor. He was inside. The fortress was breached. The Alchemist's nest, finally penetrated. Bond's eyes narrowed. Veil. I'm coming. Bond stepped into the inner chamber of the lab. The air was cool, metallic, filled with a faint chemical smell. Blue neon lines traced the walls, and strange glowing liquids moved inside tall glass tubes. There was still no live resistance. But Bond had already noticed elite guard footprints. Clearly someone had been monitoring his entrance. A sudden metallic click. A door on the opposite wall slid open, and 2 elite exosuit guards entered. Guard 1, tall, muscular, pulse rifle in hand. Guard 2, medium build, fast, holding a retractable shock baton. Bond shifted into a subtle stance. Left foot forward. Knees slightly bent. Hands loose but ready. First move, shadow strike. Bond rolled low, sliding under Guard 1's right leg, then drove an elbow strike into the shoulder joint. The guard staggered, but the suit's armor absorbed part of the impact. Bond immediately caught the guard in a judo wrist lock, twisted, and threw him down. Thud. He crashed half a meter from a glass tube. Sparks flickered. Guard 2 spun his shock baton, a blur of metallic arcs. Bond stepped back, but that was exactly where the trap lay. Forward roll. A duck under the swinging baton. A rise with a reverse spinning heel kick to the guard's midsection. Guard stumbled, dropping the baton. Bond transitioned immediately into an armbar takedown, rotated, delivered an elbow strike and a wrist twist. Guard 2 collapsed to the floor, semi-conscious. The center of the lab housed a humming bioreactor. Bond maneuvered the guards toward it. Pure spatial control. Guard 1 attempted a swipe with his rifle. Bond ducked and shoulder threw him into the control panel. Sparks burst. A red warning light flashed. Bond vaulted and kicked Guard 2 backward, sending him toward the wall, then rolled across a narrow metal beam with a precise, graceful spin. 2 more guards, alerted by calm interference, charged in simultaneously. Bond's awareness expanded to 360 degrees. Left arm, grab, twist, throw. Right leg, low sweep to the second guard. A spin, elbow strike to the chest. Step back, jump kick toward an approaching drone. He moved like living fluid, a silent weapon. Guard 1, semi-conscious. Guard 2, dazed. A drone, smashed cleanly with a controlled push. Bond was exhausted, but focused. Third guard rushed from the right. Bond used a shadow step, side roll, duck, counter, right hand jab, left elbow hammer, knee to midsection. The guard crashed into a metallic console. Sparks exploded, sirens blared. The lab lights flickered. Bond panted, muscles tight, sweat mixing with chemical fumes. Bond surveyed the floor. 4 elite guards down. Drone disabled. Lab section secure for now. He controlled his breathing, relaxed his muscles, and scanned the environment. Glass tubes, neon reactors, computer terminals, all revealing. Serum development ongoing. Security fields active further inside. Veil's office chamber nearby. Bond activated a digital map overlay from his wrist device. Next step, Veil's personal chamber and the core serum lab. Bond whispered. Almost there. Veil. Almost. Bond drew a deep breath. Inside the lab, the temperature was slightly higher. The hum of bioreactors and pulsing neon lines created an unnerving rhythm. Objective: find Veil's personal chamber and gather serum intel. Bond carefully mapped the floor tiles, glass tubes, and pipes. Tiles embedded with nano-pressure sensors. One wrong step equals instant alarm. Tubes filled with volatile chemicals. One hit equals deadly fumes. Pipes carrying hydro-nano coolant. Touch equals instant frostbite. Bond adopted micro-precision steps. Heel first placement. Knees slightly bent. A breath held the exact moment sensors passed. Every movement calculated. Every shadow, reflection, and streak of light analyzed. Bond spotted a massive reinforced vault door. Smart biometric lock. Retina scanner plus AI prediction system. Pressure-sensitive threshold. He analyzed the AI's pattern. Guard comm logs. Thermal footprints of past patrols. Micro-vibrations in the floor. He deployed his handheld hacking device. AI predicted, blinked. 0.45 seconds later, the door unlocked silently. Bond whispered. Time to meet the mastermind. Inside. Silver platforms. Blue neon tubes of fluid. Humming bioreactors. Automated injector arms moving serum vials with surgical precision. Holographic formulas floating in the air. Bond observed carefully. Serum capable of overwriting identity and memory. Multiple doses ready for dispatch. Security logs showing test subjects, locations, operatives. He recorded details in his notebook. The formula was complex, half alchemy, half advanced nanotech. Its purpose: to create empty-minded soldiers. Bond took position in a shadowed corner. From here, he could observe Veil. Two guards patrolled nearby. Motion detectors aligned perfectly to doorways. Bond deployed a mirror nanocam. Every flash of light. Every formula. Every lab movement. Captured for MI6. Bond saw Veil's silhouette behind a control panel. Tall. Lean. Charismatic. Wearing a black lab coat and metallic gloves. His fingers danced across floating hollow controls. Veil muttered formulas under his breath. Bond recognized the voice immediately. No mistake. And then the realization. Veil wasn't just creating soldiers. He was building a fully controlled army. Every micro-movement choreographed. Bond whispered. Got you. Finally. Bond exhaled deeply. All observations captured. Guards neutralized or avoided. Serum project documented. Next steps. Decide how to neutralize Veil. Extract intel safely. Avoid remaining shadow fields and turret layers. Bond's mind raced. Every detail, guard routes, lab layout, serum vials, mapped perfectly. The lab hummed quietly. Bond crouched deeper into the shadows. Veil unaware. Serum ready. Lab breached. Stage set for the final confrontation. The core chamber of the lab was humming loudly. Glowing serum inside glass tubes, holographic formulas, and the soft buzz of AI drones. Everything created an eerie symphony. Bond crouched behind a console, eyes locked on Dr. Kieran Veil. Tall, elegant, and terrifyingly calm, Veil's fingers danced across the holographic controls. He turned slowly, sensing an intruder, but not yet knowing who. Bond whispered to himself. This ends tonight. Vale fired a nanoblade swipe from his mechanical glove. Bond reacted instantly. A duck under the swipe. Low roll to the left, right fist jab to Vale's midsection. Elbow twist strike to the ribs. Vale staggered, then regained balance. Vale smirked and activated the plasma wrist blades. Bond stepped back, delivered a side kick to Vale's chest, and spun behind the pillars for cover. Bond used the lab environment strategically. Grabbed a hanging tube and swung it, knocking Vale's glove aside. A blue neon fluid spilled, making the floor slippery. Bond maintained balance while Vale almost slipped. Launched a small glass vial. Distraction, breaking line of sight. Vale recovered and lunged. Bond countered with connected strike technique. A right elbow to Vale's jaw, uppercut motion. A left leg sweep to the knees. Vaulted over Vale's back and rolled behind a console. Sparks erupted. The lab lights flickered. Tension peaked. Bond executed a fluid combination of named moves. 1. Shadow Palm, a powerful strike to Vale's chest, pushing him back. 2. Coiling Elbow, a 180-degree spin, elbow into the side ribs. 3. Viper Kick, low sweeping kick to the knees, Vale staggered. 4. Falcon Spin, spin around a console, flip, land behind Vale. 5. Iron Grip Lock, wrist twist plus armbar, momentarily immobilizing Vale. Vale countered using his mechanical glove, sparks flying, grip intense. Bond used a pressure point strike to break the lock and rolled away. The fight was cinematic, brutal, precise, every move tactical, every strike calculated. 4. Vale's counterattack, Alchemist's Wrath. Vale activated a nano-serum injector attached to his glove. Microdarts, neurotoxin spray. Smoke and chemical mist filled the lab. Vale moved with fluid agility, enhanced by serum effects. Bond countered with a sliding side kick, knocking the darts off trajectory. Grabbed the nearest vial and threw it to trigger a non-lethal explosive distraction. Spun under the plasma swipe and struck an elbow into Vale's chest, followed by a knee to the midsection. Vale finally slammed into the reactor, sparks bursting as alarms blared. Bond used the lab's destruction in his favor. Tubes shattered, fluid spills short-circuited drones. Vale forced to dodge, losing rhythm and focus. Bond used metallic rails, console edges, and glass panels for controlled momentum. Final strike. Shadow roll. A reverse elbow uppercut. Vale staggered, nearly falling into a containment reactor. Bond caught him, disabled the mechanical glove using his wrist device, and pinned him against the wall. Bond whispered, "It's over, Vale." Vale smiled faintly, still defiant. "You think you've won? You only scratched the surface." Bond ignored him and activated the recording of all serum formulas and lab data. MI6 now had everything backed up. Vale subdued but alive, for interrogation. Lab partially disabled. Serum samples secured. All guards neutralized or incapacitated. Bond stood bruised, sweating, with flickering lab lights around him. Bond surveyed the chaos. Serum formulas. Documented. Vale. Captured. Mission. Successful. But Bond knew. This is only one battle. The war Vale has started, is far from over. Lab sirens echoed, emergency lights flashed. Bond's eyes narrowed. MI6 agents arriving soon. Vale's secrets exposed. Future threats looming. The night settled over the city like a final curtain, quiet and absolute. Bond stepped out into the cold air, feeling the weight of everything that had been lost. and everything he had been forced to become. The alchemist's empire had fallen, crushed into dust beneath truth, sacrifice, and fire. And with its end, the world took one quiet breath of relief. Bond lit a cigarette, the flame reflecting in his tired eyes. A storm had passed. A war had ended. He turned away from the ruins, leaving behind the secrets, the scars, and the shadows that would never fully disappear. For now, there was silence. For now, there was peace. And somewhere deep inside, James Bond allowed himself, just for a moment, to finally breathe. The mission was over. This is the end.